Seduction depends on the fact that people lack something in their life, and you are going to be the one supplying them. The trick in seduction, of male or female seduction involves a little bit of mystery, a little bit of fantasy. It's not like everyday life. It's not like things on Instagram. It's something different. You cannot be seduced unless you are vulnerable. Falling in love and seducing is creating a wound in the other person. They need you. You're going to fill what they can't get on their own. He's got the little hook in her. He can take her wherever he wants. I'm revealing the secrets that a lot of men use. And there are men out there who have a radar for picking on women who have just the right kind of insecurities, just the right kind of vulnerabilities that they can prey upon. And for them, that would make the perfect victim. Seduction depends on the fact that people lack something in their life, right? And you are going to be the one supplying them. They're missing something, okay? The word for love, eros, and the erotic comes from the god who shoots an arrow into someone and wounds them and poisons them, right? So falling in love and seducing is creating a wound in the other person. They need you. You're going to fill what they can't get on their own. So somebody who is completely happy in their life, who's got everything they want, is very hard to seduce. Now, if you're a great seducer, a top-level seducer, you will always find something that people are missing. Nobody is completely happy. Even the very happiest person actually is probably covering up something. And so you'll be able to find that. But the woman who reveals that she's unhappy, that she's got vulnerabilities, that she's been wounded before, and there's something missing in her life, that's like, whew, I can ride right through that. I can be the one to supply. I can be the one to make her happy. They're much easier to seduce. The trick in seduction, of male or female seduction, is when you're not there, the other person is thinking about you. That is when you've succeeded. That is the game that you're trying to play. Because when you're there, they're seeing you and things are going on, they're thinking about you. But when you're absent and they're thinking about you, then you've gotten under their skin. If you're not there and they're not thinking about you, then your seduction isn't working. So the whole point is to create a fantasy in which they're going, One of the things I talk about is creating mixed signals. Like, people seem to be good, but they also show a little bit of an evil sign. And so the woman is thinking, who is this man? Do I really know him? What is he really about? I'm intrigued. And he's sort of touched on certain fantasy and points, and her imagination now takes over. She starts thinking about him. She starts imagining him as if he could be playing one of these great archetypes of the male seducer, right? He could be the rescuer. He could be the hero. And so because she has an imagination, a vivid imagination, she's enveloping him in all of these fantasies from her point of view. And so if the male seducer knows how to feed a little bit her imagination so that when he's not there, she starts enveloping him in this. There's the great writer Stendhal, the French writer who wrote a book on love. He compared it to these limbs of trees that have been dropped into this mine, this crystal mine in Germany. And when they pull them out, they're full of crystals. And he calls falling in love this crystallization method, where in your mind, crystals are forming, where you're imagining this person is fantastic and has all these fantasy elements. Well, if the woman has no imagination, is so matter of fact and so businesslike, you could do all of the tactics in the art of seduction, and she won't be thinking about you. She won't be enveloping you in these fantasies. So yeah, if you're a male seducer, you know how to create that fantasy by having a picture of holding a little cat. Oh, he's so sensitive and wonderful, or a dog, and creating this kind of image that's going to feed women's imagination. She's hooked. He's got the little hook in her. He can take her wherever he wants. So using that and being very clever with how you present yourself with the image and the words that go with it, you can feed that imagination factor. So when a man's trying to seduce a woman, there's a wariness. Women have much more to lose in a seduction than the man, right? Men, they'll sleep with anybody practically, right? We all know that. A woman has much more to lose in that process. So women are wary, right? And so you have to overcome their wariness. You have to create some trust. And if you're an honest seducer, you're creating honest trust. But if you're a dishonest seducer, you're creating a false sense of trust. And one of the strategies that I talk about is you become their friend. And when you're their friend, and this is a longer seduction, this will take several months because you can't do it in a couple of days. When you become their friend, you don't seem so threatening. The trust element comes into play. You see them as someone who genuinely likes, for a man who wants to be their friend. Well, on one hand, it might be insulting that he doesn't see me as attractive, but on the other hand, he wants to be my friend, and it's very kind of flattering. Well, you get that friendship going, and then you inject something else. You start bringing in some of that sexual element, some of that erotic element, and the trust element that has been established makes it very difficult for she becomes very confused. And because she's been emotionally connected as a friend, it's like a bridge to creating a connection sexually. So starting off by lowering their wariness of you, their suspicion, by trying to be their friend means, he's not just interested in sex, but he might be just interested in sex, but he's using this tactic to kind of lower your suspicions about him. The person is a puzzle. And the problem today, and people are so obvious, they're so goddamn obvious. They're on the internet, they're saying, here's what I have for breakfast, here's what I love. I'm just opening myself up, and this is who I am, right? But seduction involves a little bit of mystery, a little bit of fantasy. It's not like everyday life. It's not like things on Instagram. It's something different. It's theater. That's what's exciting about it, okay? So if you're the male seducer, he will be someone who seems very trustworthy, very honest, very solid. He got an MBA, he's working for Goldman Sachs. But then he reveals something a little bit rock and roll, a little bit rebellious, a little bit like he takes something else about him that doesn't quite click. Wow, I didn't know who this guy is. Maybe he's more interesting than I thought. Maybe he's not so buttoned up and so controlled as I thought. There's another aspect to him. The element of surprise that you don't know who someone is what fascinates us about a movie. When you create a character and suddenly on screen they reveal a trait that seems out of character. Wow, that's exciting. That's what makes you, that's how movies work, right? It's the same thing in real life. You create a sense of, you don't know who I am, but it has to be subtle. It's not like you're not Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. You're not half evil and half button-down banker. You're 95% banker and you're 2 or 3 or 4% of this other thing. It's a little peak of something else that intrigues, that creates a fantasy element. Seduction involves vulnerability. It involves somebody gets inside, somebody gets under our skin, right? And to do that, we have to let them in. So the person being seduced is in some ways, to a degree, complicit. Because if you just put up a wall and you said, no, I'm not going to be seduced, nothing will happen. But you have a vulnerability. You're letting that person into your psyche, into your inner space. The paradigm for that is early childhood. The child is seduced by the parent. You're in an extremely vulnerable position, right? Your life depends on them. And they're seducing you with their energy. You're letting them in, right? And that kind of creates a pattern for the rest of your life. And so, for instance, the feeling of being carried by your father and just being taken around physically is a form of seduction because you don't know what he's going to do to you. You're very excited. You want that surprise, right? And to me, it's related to the seduction of a story. Stories are very seducing to us. We don't know where they're taking us. We don't know what the next chapter is, what's going to happen to this character or not. The surprise lowers our resistance and opens our mind up to what's going to happen next is a form of seduction. Fairy tales, the stories you were reading as a child, your interactions with your parents, they're deeply, deeply ingrained in you. You cannot be seduced unless you are vulnerable, right? And so I like to switch it around and get it out of the negative connotations. Being vulnerable is actually a positive trait. I think a lot of people now in the world today, because things are so harsh and invasive, that people have become too invulnerable. They don't want to let anything in, right? And this now infects their relationships with other people. They don't want to be influenced. They want to be strong inside of themselves. They're afraid of giving in to the other person, of surrendering to their influence. But it's actually a delightful feeling to surrender to the power of another person and then reverse that charge and have them surrender to your power. So vulnerability, letting people into your mental space, is a form of intelligence. It's a kind of an emotional and an intellectual intelligence. You know, I talk about this in the first chapter about sirens, which I say is the quintessential archetype of the female seductress. The kind of half human, half bird creature on a rock, singing so beautifully that you have to jump in the water and then they kill you. And so the idea is that men want to let go because men have to be so in control, so powerful. They have to project this image. They have a secret desire to let go and be almost dominated by a very powerful woman. A lot of men have that. And I talk about some of the most powerful men in history: Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, Joe DiMaggio, all these men, very masculine men who've fallen for very feminine, siren-like women and been completely dominated by them. And they actually kind of enjoy the process because it's like a sense of, I can let go, I can enter this totally sensual physical world, and it's extremely pleasing. It's like another realm outside of my kind of cold, masculine world, you know? So I don't really get men complaining too much about women who've seduced them. Honestly, it's usually the other way around. So there's a famous French biologist from the 20s and 30s, and he was studying paramecium. And he was studying them, you know, they're in these ponds, etc. And he said that there was these moments where these single-celled organisms were suddenly coupling. They were all joining together, just one to one, and they were absorbing the membrane of one inside the other. And then they would and then once one couple did that, all the paramecium started joining up together. Then they would sink to the bottom of the pond. And paramecium don't reproduce through sex. They reproduce through dividing themselves, right? Self-reproduction. And so he was saying that the desire to couple, to connect to someone so deeply where you absorb, one is absorbed in the other, is biologically wired into us. It goes back millions and millions and millions of years, and it's a desire, essentially, a biological desire for love. And it's an energy that permeates it's not just about power and hierarchies, and that he was showing other creatures that had something similar going on. So there's something in the universe that's trying to connect things to each other. So there's this kind of energy that exists in the world where we have a deep need to connect to somebody outside of those power dynamics, where there's a degree of equality, where we're drawn to each other, and we let go of the ego games, we let go of the playing, we kind of surmount our own physiology, our own hypothalamus, and we engage in this, I call it love sublime. And it involves the physical part. The sexual part is the trigger for it. Because when you have sex with someone, your body is suddenly permeable to their energy in a way that you cannot control. It releases all kinds of chemicals in the brain that are very powerful. And oftentimes that sense is too powerful and you react and you're afraid of it and you pull back. But if you don't react and you go further, then the mind also becomes permeable to the other person and their energy and their desire. And so then it kind of creates a spiraling effect where the physical and the mental connection reaches this state that I call love sublime. Now, it's an ideal, It doesn't really exist that much out there in the world today, but there are stories in history that illustrate it, and I believe that it is a biological necessity for us to feel a deep, deep sense of connection. We normally ascribe that to religion, to God, but I maintain the essence of love, the model for love, is between two human beings. Straight or homosexual, doesn't matter. And that feeling of surmounting our own neurology, our own system, and entering this zone is deeply, deeply satisfying. We all want it. And it has to involve letting go of the power dynamics, and everything being equal. It's not that the other person is exactly like you. You recognize their difference. But as far as being worthy of attention, being worthy and respected, you leave all of that other stuff outside. So there is a zone that's possible that's outside this power dynamic that we're talking about.